All right. Welcome to your Tuesday training. I'm Dr. Kate Walker, and this is the training, the live training for members of our Step It Up group. So it's kind of exclusive, it's kind of special, but if you're listening to this on a replay, you're special and you're amazing because you're taking time out of your day to watch some training. Also, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you're awesome too, because you're listening to this on the way to baseball practice or hockey practice or to the gym, whatever it is that you're doing. You're taking a little extra time for you and your clinical skills. So today I'm going to talk you through how I do a couple intake. Now, if you're watching the video, you will get to see me share my screen. If you're listening to me, don't worry, because I will talk you through everything I'm doing. And with a couple intake, what I tell you is almost as important as what I'm going to show you. Why am I doing this? Well, there was a comment last week at TCA about, it's a shame that we don't really get to watch each other do the things. It would be great if we had these examples. And I know in grad school, we got to watch some cool videos of the masters, doing their thing. And it was, and it is wonderful when you're able to have a video just to see how somebody else does it. Now, this isn't that video. I'm not going to be demonstrating on an actual couple. Believe me, I thought about it. And the reason I don't is because this interview is so good, not because it's mine, but because what it does is it fosters the beginning stages of intimacy. Now, I will tell you, I conduct a couple assessment really over 4 sessions. So the first session feels like an interview. I go through what I'm about to go through with you. Then the second and third sessions are individual. They are one and done individual sessions. They are the only time I will ever meet with the folks in this couple individually, and it's to assess for a lot of things. If there were any red flags from the interview, if there, or I'll assess for addiction and domestic violence. I'll also make sure at that second and third session, each person understands I am inviting them to set a personal goal for themselves. I'm not going to reveal what that is, because those individual sessions are confidential unless they reveal an active affair or an active addiction. Those are secrets. I make it very clear from the beginning. I will not keep. So the fourth session is a communication exercise. So by the end of that fourth session, my couples can expect feedback on how they communicate, as well as some specific steps they can take. I almost said measurable. That's so in my head, right? Specific, measurable, trackable. But these are really just specific steps they can take. Think of it as homework or, whatever. And they can then decide where they want to take the couple counseling from there. Because I am very solution focused, I'm always inviting the couple to decide if they are wanting to come back, if they would like more sessions, if they feel better now. I'm always trying to co-create with them this reality where better happens. So I'm taking you through 5 things today. I think I can get through all of this. Actually, I did 1 and 1A. So I think there are, maybe 6 things. Okay. So here's what you, my badasses, are going to leave with. You're going to learn the things I do say, the things I skip. You're going to understand the importance of keeping things equal, the importance of making sure everybody just tells their story one time, and taking a systems perspective. And finally, you'll understand the importance of a 3-point wrap-up. And probably most importantly, you'll understand that this is just how I do it. All right. I'm trained as a marriage and family therapist. I'm trained as a marriage and family therapist supervisor. I've gotten specific trainings over the years. This is really how I do it. It's not the way, it is a way. But I wanted to do this for you guys because of what I said earlier. You just don't get to see how another person does a thing. And so sometimes it's kind of nice to be like, oh, thank goodness, I'm doing it like Kate does. Or, ooh, Kate's not doing this. I better email her and say, hey, you need to do this. This is the latest research. Remember, when I show you my stuff, you got to promise to help me out. If you see something that's outdated or just plain wrong, all right? So let's get started. I'm going to hit the old share screen button. And for that, I need my glasses. So you will see lots of glare, but that's okay. So what you are now looking at is my intake. Now it is long, and it's long because it's designed to get a lot of information. So I will show you things I skip and things I add, but I'm actually going to shove number 2 to number 1. So I mentioned the importance of keeping things equal. And in the research, we even refer to this as utterances. So the things that each couple, each part of the couple says out loud. It's so important in that space that you become the least anxious presence in the room. This is referring to Bowenian triangulation, therapeutic triangulation. So when there are two people who are at odds, right, there's some conflict, you, my therapist friend, become that least anxious presence, and it affects the entire system. And so making a commitment to keep things equal is how you are going to show your couple people that this is a safe space. This is an ethical imperative, of course, but it is also a clinical imperative as you are aware of this is a functioning system right here. It may not be pretty, it may not be what they wish it was, but it is functioning as it will, and you are now part of that. So keeping things equal is you being that non-anxious presence in the room. So there are times you're going to feel like a basketball referee and, a traffic cop. That's okay, right? The important thing is you start off at the very beginning, keeping things equal. So you'll notice what I have here it looks like a lot of demographic information. And so, this is stuff I don't dive into a lot. It's usually things now I can glean from their intake paperwork. So what I want to draw your attention to is this box. And so if you're listening to me, all we're looking at this box. And this box is empty because I'm not a keep it in the lines kind of person. I have a box so I can draw and I can take notes how I want to take notes. But here's the rule. Everybody gets to tell their story one time. And so I am loaded with responses like, oh, Diana, it sounds like you want to respond to Don's comment about that. And I hear you, and I want to let you know, we'll talk about that in a minute. But for now, this is Don's turn. And so Don's going to tell his story. So, and y'all don't hold me to these names. I'm going to switch them 50 times during this presentation, I imagine. So everybody tells the story one time, and I invite them. I might look at Diane and say, or actually I would look at both of them and I would say, so who wants to tell me first why counseling and why now? Because as a therapist, we're all aware that the problem has been building, right? Coming to therapy isn't like the day after they found out the problem, unless, of course, it was a discovery of an affair. So if that's the case, you'll hear, well, I found out that, Don was having an affair, or I found text messages from Diane's boyfriend on her phone. Then it is an incident, of course, but it still behooves you to say why counseling and why now, and to have both partners tell the story. So Diane may say, yep, we're here because I intercepted a phone call from Don's girlfriend and we're in counseling. Okay. Don, what are your comments on Diane's comments? well, yeah, I mean, it's what she said, but for years I've been feeling neglected. I've been feeling this, I've been feeling that. And Diane may want to say, up, but you stop, right? Channel your inner traffic cop and say, Diane, hang on just a minute. I'm going to let Dawn finish. And I commit to both of you that I will make sure to keep this equal throughout our time together today. So keeping things equal, and everyone gets to tell the story one time. Now, there's another reason for this, and you'll see as we get to the rest of this interview. Now, I'm going to scroll to page 2. Now, page 2 has to be my favorite part of this interview. I love this. In fact, I've memorized it, and I don't even look at the page anymore. So if you're listening to me, here are the things I ask each of them, and here's how I preface it. Okay, guys, the next questions I'm going to ask you are going to feel like an interview, but whatever I ask one, I'm going to ask the other. So let's start. I'll ask who would like to go first. Or if they seem highly conflicted, again, I'm the non-anxious presence in the room. I may say, you know what, Dawn, tell me, what are the qualities that initially attracted you to Diane? Now, I will tell you, over the years that I've done this, I have a little stopwatch in my head where when I feel like Don has told his story, I will stop and say, okay, Diane, your turn. Tell me, what are the qualities that initially attracted you to Don? Now, it's really common for each to try to get back into the problem story. And I will say something like, we will get to that, I promise. Or I might say something like, in fact, that's our next question. So I do it sort of like, I don't know what kind of game, checkers, I guess. So if Don answered this question first and Diane was second, the next question, I will start with Diane, and then Don will go second. So back when I was face-to-face and everybody was on the couch in front of me, generally, I just started with the person on my right. And I figured out over the years with couples, it's so funny, especially with men and women, I would be like, why are the women always on my right? And then I realized, oh my gosh, this is great information. He did ladies first. So what does that tell me about the system? And I would start to analyze that. I'm telling you, you get so much great information just by where people are sitting in that office across from you. But I digress. Now, so other questions on page 2. After what initially attracted you, what are some negative concerns that you initially had in the relationship? What are some present positive attributes of your partner? What are some negatives about your partner? What are some things you do or could do to make the marriage more fulfilling for your partner? What are some things that your partner does or could do to make it more fulfilling for you? And what are some expectations you had about relationships? Now, I'm going to give you a big old caveat here. If you are seeing this couple for infidelity, it is imperative that you look at the partner who did not do the thing, the betrayed partner, and you look them square in the eye and you say, I am not trying to establish causality here. It doesn't matter what you were doing. If you were swinging by the chandelier naked with the plumber, that did not cause your partner to have an affair. Now, that example probably didn't make any sense, but you get the idea. We cannot cause another person to cheat. And so as you're gathering this background information, it is, I'm going to use the word again, imperative that you let the partner who was betrayed understand and know and really hear you say it, that they did not cause their partner to cheat. So when you're saying, when he or she is saying, what is a negative attribute? Well, you know what? They leave their shoes out every night. You know what? They walk past the dishes for days. You know what? They never take out the trash. Well, you know what? That's not a reason for you to have an affair. And you may have to say this multiple times with infidelity as you're gathering this information, because you've already told them this is going to feel like an interview. You've already told them you will keep it fair and equal. And I hope you've told them at the end, you will give them this 3-point wrap up that I will talk about in just a second, I promise. So getting on to page 3, I love this part. Now, those of you who are listening, basically what it's going through are things like affection, child rearing rules, commitment, emotional closeness, financial security, housework sharing. Now, I'm a Gottman fan, and I understand what it means to share household duties and what that does to a relationship. So I'm going to ask each partner on a scale of 1 to 5 how they feel about the present state of the relationship. And I may have to explain this. And I've learned over the years, I skip a lot of this because I know the research about the things that impact relationships the most. Again, I'm not trying to establish causality of why a partner did a thing. This is helping me to understand the state of the relationship, and I keep it moving. So on a scale of 1 to 5, Dawn, let me know how do you feel about affection in the marriage? It's a 1. Diane, on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is wonderful, 1 isn't so great, how do you feel the state of affection is in the marriage? It's a 5. I think we're great. Okay, that's something to take note. That kind of disparity, one person thinks it's the other one thinks it's amazing. We got some stuff to dig into, but not today, right? Today, if you start following those rabbits down those trails, you are going to get in the weeds with your couple. So this is when I get to talk about the importance, and this is a systemic view of the how versus the what. And a lot of our new associates and even seasoned counselors, they want to grab onto the what. Look what they said. Oh, we need to talk about that. Or we need to make sure that we follow that. No, instead notice the how. How are they sitting? How are they conversing? How are they looking at each other? Are they hesitating before they speak? Are they checking their partners before they answer? Are they giving you direct eye contact? Are they able to answer the questions, or are they just simply saying, I don't know, I don't know? So following the what they say down those rabbit holes, you will never get through this intake. It won't happen. And I hate to say this, and I will own this as this is something I have been trained to do and to think, and how I train others. If you get into the weeds with your couple client, whether they're, and I know I used the term married before, it doesn't matter if they're married or not married or whatever, you have now raised your anxiety, right? Because you're kind of like that bloodhound on the scent of a rabbit, and you're thinking, I've got to follow this. No, you don't, not yet. Breathe. Remain that non-anxious presence in the room. Very important. All right. I am not going to lie. I skipped this part about which partner spends more time conducting the following activities. Not that they're not important, but I'm going to ask them in their individual as well, because this is perspective a lot of times, right? Sometimes I call it 2 corners in 1 car wreck, right? If I'm the cop and I'm investigating the car wreck and you're a witness, and then I've got another witness on that corner over there, I'm going to have, maybe you're going to say, oh, look, the car's fine. And the other witness over here, I walk across the street, and they're going to say, oh my gosh, the car's totaled. You're both right, because you're both looking at it from your corner. So I do focus on things like auto repairs, child discipline, employment, grocery shopping, making the bed, recreational activities. But I save that for the individual session when I'm getting that perspective from each one of your corners. All right, the next page, I don't do this anymore. I used to. This is, for those of you who are listening, it says circle the appropriate response. Who does X behavior most of the time, some of the time, or all of the time? Again, you can probably guess this is something I save for their individual session. So things like who apologizes, who gets quiet, who criticizes, who leaves the house, who makes peace. And you can probably guess the reason I don't do this anymore in that initial couple session, right? If you're assessing for domestic violence, you're not going to, number one, either you won't get honest answers here, right? Someone will be kind of turning the volume down on the severity, or they'll be turning the volume up on it. It's hard to tell because you're just getting to know these folks, right? You'll get to this part of the assessment maybe 45 minutes in, 30 minutes in. You've known these people 30 minutes. So I save it for the individual session when I'm assessing. This I never skip. So this is psychiatric history. I find this to be so important because, again, food for thought for that individual session. I'm taking notes about what kind of medications they've had in the past. Here's a real common one. I'll have adults in the room who will be taking Xanax, or they'll be taking Adderall. And I will say, oh, so you're diagnosed with anxiety, or, oh, you're diagnosed with ADHD. And they'll be like, no. And I'll be like, well, yeah, you are. I mean, if you have the medication. So sometimes it's a moment of psychoeducation, or we'll dive a little deeper, or I'll find out about a past trauma. And they'll start to put two and two together that, oh, when they had their second child, they went to the doctor, they were put on an antidepressant. Maybe that was postpartum depression. And we start kind of teasing these things out. And they didn't understand, or they didn't realize what they were experiencing and what it meant. And we can start to put two and two together. But again, not in this session. Right? This is food for thought for the next session, that individual second and third session. Again, this is, if you're watching it, this is a quickie depression assessment, as well as an assessment for alcohol consumption and violence and things like that. You can already guess this is something I skip and bring into the individual session, unless there are some real markers for maybe some suicidal ideation or severe depression. And everybody out here should have that in their hip pocket, right? You should have some kind of a quickie assessment for these things so you can dive a little further. I'm not going to talk about it during this episode, but definitely maybe that's something we can talk about in the future. And finally, I never skip the medical. This is so important. My internship was with chronic pain patients. So these are folks who'd been injured, or they were, suffering from some kind of a terminal, or even not terminal, just a chronic illness. And the effect of medication on mood, the effect of medication on sexual function, the effect of mood on, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes it's so nice. And that was Andy asking to be let out. I'm sorry, bud, you're going to have to wait a minute. The effect of so-called medical conditions and medical interventions on mood and intimacy and relationship. You may be the person who gets to tell this couple for the very first time the impact this is having on them individually and as a couple. Now, let's get to the things that I add. So, not going to screen share anymore. I'm going to stop the share. One of the things I add at the end is, okay, what am I not asking? Now, here's a little secret I didn't tell you before. One of the things I learned to do early on is to create a timeline. And I literally, on a blank piece of paper, either in addition to this or just another sheet of paper, I'll start putting things down. So when they mention, for instance, the birth of their first child, I'll just casually ask, okay, what year was that? Or I'll try to do the math in my head, which isn't always successful. So I'm taking this timeline of job changes, moves, new babies, marriages, injuries, death of a parent, significant, whether they're good or they're bad. I'm taking notes and putting together a timeline. So at the end, I say, okay, guys, what question am I not asking here? And I invite them to fill in the gap. And I usually give them a parameter of about 5 years, but sometimes we have to widen that. And I'll say, okay, and I'll find out they've moved 12 times in 5 years, or someone was shipped overseas and they were part of a governmental coup as when they were on a work site. Yeah, I'll find some things out that they don't think to bring to my attention, right? Because for the couple, sometimes they think, no, this is what we're bringing. Pay attention to this. But I'm supposed to be trained to look way over here and way over here, which brings me to the 3-point wrap up. I always let couples know at the end of this session, I'm going to give you some directions that we can take. And if you decide to go forward, I will give you some homework, things to look up, things to read, so that when you come back, we can discuss it. So this is what they've been waiting for. And my 3-point wrap up, and what I generally train my associates to do also, is going to be surrounding stress. And that is literally like the Holmes and Ray scale. I am giving them feedback on the number and severity of good things and bad things. So, you had triplets. Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, you also had to bury your mom that same year. Oh, and you lost your job. Oh, and that caused you to have to move. And oh, now your job is 6 weeks on and 2 weeks off. And right. So I help them understand the impact of stress. Anxiety goes up, cognition goes down, takes away your team skills, makes you a surviving individualist. And that can affect the couple. And I invite them. I will say, have you discussed this before? Have you thought about this before? And if they say no, I will say, okay, then I will put that down as a direction we can take. Moving on. And I go to number 2, which is usually related to the life stage. Are you in the new parent stage? Have you just launched your last kiddo and now you are in that phase of, we're approaching retirement, we have to be a couple again? Psychoeducational time. I let them know how these things can impact a couple. I'm not talking about cause. I'm not saying these things can absolutely, definitely cause the problem you're dealing with. I simply help them understand they're normal, that everybody goes through these things, right? This is how I help the client buy in to the therapy process. I've kept it equal. I've helped them understand I'm not chasing after any rabbits. I'm paying attention to the how and not the what. And now is the moment when I help them see these are things that anybody could struggle with. And finally, number 3 is the presenting issue. If it's an affair, if it's an intimacy issue, if it's a parenting issue that's affecting their marriage, I help them understand ways that this will affect their marriage, ways that they can recover and do better. And then I will invite them to do some research on their own if they're interested, right? So that 3-point wrap up again. I talk about the impact of stress because I've been good and I've kept the timeline and I've asked them, okay, what am I not asking? I give them information about the life cycle and where they are in that. And then I save the presenting issue for last and give them information and invite them to do their own research. So looking at Gottman's 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse of Marriage, inviting them to do some research, Tversky's Addictive Thinking, inviting them to read something about infidelity recovery. And then I invite them to schedule their individual appointments. And that is how I do a couple intake. So I hope I hit all of the things and you were able to understand what I add, what I skip, why I keep it equal, taking that systemic view of the least anxious presence, and the triangle being the therapeutic triangle. And then, of course, ending with a 3-point wrap up that invites the couple to be a part of the process and hopefully creates buy-in. Guys, I am so glad you hung in here today, and I hope this is helpful just to hear how another person does a couple intake. All right, guys, have a wonderful week, and I will see you next Tuesday.